Since the Nvidia leak first dropped, everyone's been wondering, where is Final Fantasy IX Remake? The Nvidia leak turned out to be completely correct. It confirmed a ton of, at the time, unannounced games. Shin Megami Tensei 5 coming to PC in the form of Vengeance, Kingdom Hearts 4, and a ton of other games. So now everyone is wondering, where is FF9 Remake? For context, we just recently did a video talking about Naoki Yoshida, the head of Creative Studio 3, discussing that him and his team are working on 2 brand new unannounced projects, and what those projects could potentially be. There was a lot of discussion on if him and the team were working on a Final Fantasy IX Remake. However, I wasn't so sure about it. I actually feel more like him and his team are working on the Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, as Creative Studio 3 has a ton of former Evil East staff, people from Vagrant Story, people from Final Fantasy XII in CS3, and so it would only make sense for me for their top priority to be Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. The other game seems to be some other sort of AAA game that is going to be building off of Final Fantasy XVI's engine. And so it makes sense to me that those are the 2 projects that they're working on, Tactics Remaster and some unannounced AAA game, and I don't think that unannounced AAA game is Final Fantasy IX Remake. That is what the current theory is, and it seems today that YoshiP has confirmed that I'm on the right track with my theory there. But please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You guys are killing it right now. I genuinely think we are going to hit 100K long before the end of the year. But please, smack that button, guys. We are almost at 99K. Take us to the top. I can't believe this is finally happening. I'm so excited to finally get to 100K this year. And I also think that this is finally going to be the year that we at least hear about Final Fantasy IX officially in some capacity. So today in the live letter for Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, the new expansion for FF14, shout out to Genki at GenkiJPN for actually clipping this part of the actual live letter. He said the media comments about working on multiple projects they can't speak about became 2 projects, then became coming soon, then became it's FF9 because of the FF14 collab, then became people fighting that they didn't want YoshiP to do action. That's right, as in action combat. So let's go ahead and watch this clip together because I think YoshiP has a lot to say here and it's pretty funny.
By no means are we trying to put blame on any of our members of the media. We're just hoping that the correct information becomes amplified. So again, Yoshida is not working on any sort of Final Fantasy IX remake. It's a wonderful, wonderful title, and a lot of us are fans of the original Final Fantasy IX, but it's quite a hefty game. I think it might be even more, it has more volume than Final Fantasy VII, so the scale of it is just much different. And I think we would have to be very careful and mindful if we were to handle Final Fantasy IX. But yeah, so please don't argue whether or not you can accept the fact or not.
いやもうさ、9のリメイクはいいけど、吉野やらせるとアクションになるから嫌だって書いてあって、9リメイクするならちゃんとターンベースでやるよって思って、それだけ言っとくわと思った。
One additional thing, and sorry, I'm cutting into the time here, but when talking about if Yoshida were to remake Final Fantasy IX, there were comments about how, no, if he handles it, it's going to turn into an action game, so I don't want it. But I mean, Final Fantasy IX, I think whomever would handle it would probably make it turn-based. I would make it turn-based.
Okay, so really interesting commentary there at the end about FF9 Remake being turn-based. I'm pretty sure that it is going to be turn-based. I've always pretty much thought it was going to be turn-based from the moment that I heard it. I anticipate FF9 Remake to be a much more purist remake than something like Final Fantasy VII, which made some pretty drastic changes to some of the story details, the combat, and numerous other things. I don't think FF9 Remake is going for that one-to-one scale. I think that this is still going to be a game that has a world map, an ATB system, and all these sort of staples that you would expect from a game like this. I also don't think that YoshiP is anti-turn-based because of the style that he went with in Final Fantasy XVI. I think that's kind of a ludicrous sentiment, but I also think too that the kind of takeaway from Final Fantasy XVI's combat in a lot of the criticisms, at least from the well-reasoned people, is not that that combat system was action. I don't think that was, really the criticism that most people have. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are definitely some turn-based stands out there who are like, no, NSP, you are so wrong. My precise criticism is just that it was action. There are people that hate, Final Fantasy VII re-trilogy combat, and I think that's also ridiculous too, because the way that game merges action and turn-based together in such a seamless way. I think that FF7 was able to switch to that action system in such a successful way, in part because FF7 we've had things like Advent Children and Crisis Core, and things that have really primed our brain for the experience of seeing Cloud move around in an action system. And then on top of that, it still really retained most of the turn-based elements, most of the strategic elements. In fact, I would say that Re-Trilogy as a series, especially when played on its harder difficulties, is as strategic, or quite possibly, and honestly even more strategic than the original game. And whenever I think about titles like Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, it is really hard for me in those particular games to let go of the idea of turn-based. In my head, those games should definitely be turn-based, should definitely stay turn-based. I think about Final Fantasy X-3, which is something that Creative Business Unit 1 flirts with a lot, discussing about making a third FF10 game. And every time I think about that, I'm just like, I don't want to imagine Final Fantasy X's world with action combat. I just don't. That is a turn-based world. I'm open to it with future Final Fantasies. I would love for Final Fantasy 17, for example, to keep action combat, to kind of adapt and make the Re-Trilogy combat something new and exciting, but kind of keep that formula of you're hitting an enemy, you're building up an ATB bar, and then unleashing a powerful attack. That is something that I do want to see be retained in Final Fantasy 17. I don't think that it's necessary for them to default back to turn-based. That being said, if FF17 was turn-based, I totally would not mind. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here is FF9 is something that as a property, I imagine being turn-based. And I don't think that YoshiP would actually try to make it an action game. And if he did, if he was the one in charge of FF9, which he says here that he's not, then I don't think he would try to make it the same type of action game that FF16 is. Because, oh my god, I could not imagine what the reaction to that would be, but I don't think he would ever actually do that. I don't think that's him. I think when working on a remake, he'd probably have a lot more reverence to the source material, whereas FF16 was something brand new and wasn't beholden to a source material. But it does continue a big question here. If YoshiP is not the one working on Final Fantasy IX Remake, who is? I think it's first important to note, and a lot of people will bring this up, YoshiP also said that he was not the director of Final Fantasy XVI, and that he was tired of the rumors. This was before the game was announced. And it was true. He was not the director. He was the producer. So YoshiP has a way of wording things that doesn't necessarily make it a lie, but also doesn't really tell the full truth. Although here, I'm not really sure how he could be doing that. I think that someone else in Square Enix is handling it. A lot of people are thinking that it's Creative Business Unit 1. They're thinking that Kitase is the one over it. I think that it's happening somewhere in Creative Studio 2. Sorry if I'm using CBU and CS, Creative Studio, Creative Business interchangeably here. For those who don't know, they've been changed over from Creative Business Unit to Creative Studio. But in either case, I feel like it's somebody in Creative Studio 2 that's handling it. But that is just a hunch. But that's because Creative Studio 1 is busy with the remake trilogy, finishing that up. They're also working on Kingdom Hearts 4. It's possible that they have something else going on in there, maybe FF9 Remake, but I don't feel like it's being handled by them. Again, this is just my educated guess. For all we know, Yoko Taro is working on Final Fantasy IX Remake. Actually, that would be incredible. I would love that. So this is also something I want to talk about that, again, lets you know that Final Fantasy IX Remake is real. So Epic is coming up with Epic DB, which is basically going to function a lot like Steam DB. However, it just recently went live and it was not very secure, and it has leaked a ton of games. And we have here in an article from thegamer.com with them saying, quote, Square Enix isn't immune to this either, as two code names have been spotted, those being Sokolov and Momo. We know that Sokolov is Final Fantasy XVI, as it was announced last year would be getting a PC port. And this database entry has 3 pieces of DLC, a demo, a literal cloud save destination of Final Fantasy XVI attached. Pretty spot on. So we know that one's FF16. This is where things get even more interesting. Momo is more interesting though, as while the name Final Fantasy IX can't be found, various references to the game can. On the Offers tab for Momo Production, you can find a listing for an early purchase bonus Tetramaster starter pack and pre-order bonus Thieves' Knives. So it seems like Final Fantasy XVI and Final Fantasy IX Remake are coming to the Epic Game Store, at least according to this leak from them. Will these games become Epic Game Store exclusives? I don't want to see that being the case. I don't think it'd be a good move, as I think that Square Enix aggressively trying to pursue a multi-platform strategy should have games coming to Steam and Epic Game Store rather than there being a platform exclusive on PC. We know that even though Epic Game Store gives developers a bigger cut, especially if they use Unreal Engine, Steam also gives more players access to the game. More people buy games on Steam. And so as a result, they benefit a lot from having this game on Steam and Epic Game Store, give the consumer the choice to make on which platform they wish to purchase it on. I think that's the best route. And also, Final Fantasy XVI is definitely not being developed on Unreal Engine. That game was made on its own custom engines. I don't think it has the same benefit there. With Final Fantasy IX, however, I definitely think that that is an Unreal Engine game for sure. I don't think there's any way they built a proprietary engine for that. They didn't even do that for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's almost certainly running on Unreal Engine. So of course, there may be some benefit there to having it on the Epic Game Store. But again, people want this on Steam. They want to be able to play it on their Steam Deck. But the most important thing is that this lets us know again and again and again, Final Fantasy IX Remake does indeed seem to be real. But these are just my thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments below. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Later, guys.